to you. Well, a few years ago, one Sunday morning, our electric guitar player called in sick, and a member of the band said, well, I know someone who might play. And about 30 minutes later, in walked Brian Twomey. And although Brian was not a churchgoer at that time, you might say, that's a one way of putting it. He didn't go to church on a break ever, but he did enjoy playing, he said afterwards, and he felt like he got something out of the talk, and so he'd like to keep going. Well, over time, many of us have gotten to know Brian as a very talented, very committed, very funny, very likable guy. After a while, Brian had crossed the line of faith and was baptized. I had the opportunity to be a part of that. He has become really one of my favorite people. He teaches over, not that picture, but he teaches over at Alcott Middle School. He is a serious biker. The other day before we played at OU, he said, I'm kind of tired. I rode 60 miles this morning. I don't even like to drive 60 miles. He's a really good basketball player. Here's proof of that. He's a very important part of the Seeker Band. And so right now I'd like you to welcome to the stage Mr. Brian Twomey. Come on up, Brian. Well, Brian, before we get started, there was one other picture that was on your Facebook page I thought might need a little explanation.
Oh, God. There's another one.
No, that's
Okay.
it. But yeah, that's maybe that was before you started coming to the church phase. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Probably.
I was in Stillwater. I was trying to fit in. That's the truth. I was in Stillwater
Good
that day,
thinking. Nice job. Well played. Well, Brian has very bravely agreed to come up and talk about a part of his life that most people would prefer to keep very private, and I appreciate his courage. And I believe that what you've been through and what you're going to talk about here is going to speak to hopefully all of us in one way or another. So let's get started. I've heard that they say, experts in this field say that family and or environmental factors sometimes cause certain people to have a predisposition, a genetic predisposition or environmental predisposition to addictions or abuse. Do you personally think that's true, and do you think that had something to do with your situation?
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. The best way I can explain it is, for me, I was always uncomfortable. So I think I was predisposed to this because I felt like I drew my first easy breath, the first time I had a drink. So I think it's just part of the way I've been made. Yeah, I'd say I'm definitely predisposed to it.
When did people don't become addicted the first time they smoke marijuana or drink a beer, or, they're not. But at what point did the behavior start that eventually led you down the road of addiction?
Again, I think that I go to AA meetings. I think we'll be getting to that later, but they say a lot in there that we're bodily and mentally different than our fellows, and I believe that's true. So, like I said, when I was a kid, I never felt right, and I could say the first time I drank, I remember getting some liquor out of my dad's liquor cabinet, and I remember drinking it and the kind of hot feeling in my chest and the warmth in your stomach, and whatever it was just kind of set me free. And so I didn't get to addiction right when I had my first drink, but I knew that was there, and so I was kind of restrained by the presence of my parents and situational factors, right? So as soon as I went to college and I had no supervision, it was on. So I think
how old were you when you first did that, do you think?
When I first did
when you first got
drank.
some liquor out of the cabinet or whatever.
Oh, 14, something like that, 13, 14, 15.
So you knew at that time it kind of resonated with you.
Yeah, I just remember the way I felt, so I wanted to do that as much as possible.
So what was, people end up doing drugs or drinking for a variety of reasons. They might do it to escape pain of some kind. They might do it for fun. They might do it to fit in with other kids who are doing it. What was it for you that kind of
all of the above, I think.
All of those things?
It started out as fun, and then it gave me relief from the way I felt. So I guess it was somewhat of an escape. The best way I can say it to you is I feel uncomfortable just kind of always. And then I get a drink in my body and I feel like Superman or something. All of a sudden I'm untouchable, and everyone likes me, and I'm not as worried about what people think about me. So, really, I did it because it gave me like courage to live life, is what I felt like liquid courage. So.
Now, when you first took that drink, and when you got in college or whatever, did you think about, oh man, this might lead me to addiction someday? Or was that even on the radar screen in your mind at all? Did you even think about what it could eventually cause in your life?
I was looking about this far in front of myself at all times. You know, I'm looking for right now, for the moment. How do I feel right now? I was never worried about 6 months from now, a year from now, any time in the future. So I didn't worry about anything but having a good time, you know, and everything, parents, teachers, school, jobs, driving, anything that stood in my way was just kind of like a block from me having fun. So that's kind of how I viewed it. I just didn't think about it until I started to get consequences, I guess.
Yeah, that's the next question is, when did the consequences or maybe negative ramifications start to outweigh or outnumber the fun, the escape, the friends? You know, when did the negative start to outweigh the positives to you?
In various locations. Like, I happen to be really good at lying to myself and living in denial, I guess. So, I mean, I got my first DUI when I was 18 on Christmas Day. And that's how my parents celebrated 1998 Christmas, by picking me up from jail. And, you know, I felt ashamed, but I thought, well, I shouldn't have gone out and drinking on Christmas night and then driving home. That's the mistake I made. And over time, I caught more consequences, but to really like penetrate my ego, I mean, I think about it like this, like if you had something that was what you felt like was your saving grace, what gave you the courage and the strength to live your life, you wouldn't want to give that up, you know? And I didn't want to give it up until it became bad enough. So long story short, I got my third alcohol-related driving offense. And in the state of Oklahoma, that means a mandatory 3-year suspension. So at that point, I just kind of came up against a wall. You know, there's no denying that this is a problem. You know, now I can no longer drive. For the state of Oklahoma doesn't trust me.
For 3 years, you didn't get to drive?
Uh-huh.
That's how you took up bike riding, I guess.
Uh-huh. It is. Yeah. It really is. So, yeah.
Well, you know, you mentioned about your folks and everything, and I know you have a sister. It's just you and your sister, right? You and your folks. His folks have been here a few times, and they live. Where do they live?
They live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Right now.
And so, where do you feel like your addiction started to do the most damage? Was it to your parents? Was it physically? Was it school? Was it relationally? Was it spiritually? How did you feel that it was starting to do damage in your life?
I think on that question, all of the above. Again, I mean, I was so selfish and self-centered that I didn't really see the damage that I was causing. I was so focused on myself and how I felt and my pleasure or whatever, that I kind of objectified everything and everybody. It definitely damaged my family relationships because I was close to my parents growing up. I was, great, straight A student, all E's for effort, everything. I did my best, and I was a good little Brian guy. And then when you start doing things that you have to lie to your parents about, that destroyed that relationship. And so, but like I said, it blinds you. And to me, I didn't value that relationship with my parents, and so I just kind of threw it away, right? And I don't know. I threw away. I used people. Definitely did a lot of people using, not just substance using. So I think it's like, again, in the AA meetings, people like to say you're like a tornado going through the life of everyone around you. And you don't see the damage you're doing until you stop spinning, I guess. So.
You had a third arrest for DUI. At what age was that, like 20?
23.
23.
Yeah.
Okay. So besides that, were there any other factors that started making you go, this is serious. I have a problem. This has hurt people that I care about. It has started to affect my life in a pretty, serious way. What were the things then, or was it just those, or were there other factors that made you go that this is getting really bad?
The best way I can describe it is like it's a cloudy day, and every so often there's a break in the clouds, and some light shines through, and I saw the reality of what I was doing. But most of the time, was intentionally oblivious to the damage I did to myself and others. But there were times, when now I've no call, no showed from 2 jobs at the University of Oklahoma, and I'm considered unemployable by them. And so I end up working at Fazoli's, No offense to anybody that works or has worked in fast food, but that's not a place I saw myself, And then there was another experience when I worked at Fazoli's. This guy had to be in his 30s or something. He seemed like he should be living like an adult by this point in life. And we were having a conversation on a smoke break, and the guy was telling me very briefly that he had a choice to make. And he had enough money to either go to court and get his driver's license back and get right with the law, or drink, and he chose drinking. So, and times like that, I remember looking at the guy just dumbfounded, like, really? You can get your car back, man. He's like, yeah, I'd rather drink every night. I still remember the guy. In fact, I've seen him, so locally, he still waits tables, so still doing that.
So were you sort of saying, if I don't quit, that's going to be me in 10 years or so? Would you kind of say
yeah, that would be kind of like a light through the clouds. At that point, I saw myself, and I thought, surely I'm not like this guy, surely. But years from now, if I didn't change what I was doing, I'm just like him. I was doing the same things as him, working and drinking every day. So,
how old were you when you went to your first AA or NA meeting? You recall?
Oh, like 20. Oh, I don't know. I was court ordered as part of the DUI to get that off my back, but I don't really remember. I think I would go high and stuff.
When you went on your own volition was about
of my own volition.
Yeah. Never
20,
on your own volition.
No, I did. I did once. I realized my life was going wrong at about 21, and then it didn't work out because the guy who was trying to help me told me that I shouldn't be hanging out with that girl. That's not a healthy relationship. So I told him, I don't really need your advice then. I'll just keep doing it. And then I came back at 24 when I had that 3rd DUI, and I was more broken at that point. So 24 years old.
Now, I know that you grew up you have some church background, right? Your folks went to church. Mm-hmm. Sometimes did they go regularly or just infrequently, or how did that kind of go?
I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic schools my whole life. Went to church every Sunday school. I had all the little reconciliation, all the little steps that you do as a Catholic, First Communion, confirmation.
So when you got in AA and they talk about the higher power concept, how did you relate to that? How did you define or think of the higher power?
I've had ever since my young age, I remember like reading the Nicene Creed in church and thinking, that's ridiculous. Surely that's not the truth. And I don't know, from the time I was little, I didn't believe that. And so I never believed in God. I thought all these people were just, I don't know what they're doing, lying to themselves and singing about it, or I don't know what, but so I never really believed in that. And higher power to me, I just didn't know what I was doing. All I knew is I was so broken that I had no other options really. And I could see people who were just like me in this AA meeting that used to meet on Main Street. And I would see people getting better. And as I saw other people's lives getting better, I thought, well, surely, something about this works. So to me, a higher power at that time was just the Alcoholics Anonymous group, and the results. So my higher power was that, just results.
Was the fact that it was working for some people, you figured there had to be something powerful enough to it to change people that you'd seen had been living just like you, basically.
Oh, yeah. So I still know that to be true today. I see people that are not themselves, or they're not the person they came in as. So.
I've kind of wondered this. In AA meetings, they say, hi, I'm Brian, an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. Why don't they say, hi, I'm Brian, and I used to be an alcoholic?
Because, unfortunately, I'll never drink successfully. So, me personally, I can say that for myself that, I've had periods where I would stop drinking, but the reason that I stopped drinking was always some negative consequence, happened, and I realized, whoa, I better stop. And then I would start again thinking, hey, I can handle this, I think. And it would start out 1 beer, 2 beer, 3, 6, maybe you got your factor, maybe 12, 24. So it would just always build back up, and inevitably I would pick up where I left off. So every time in fact, I've been sober about going on 2 years now. And how do you put this? My first drink from the period of sobriety before that was Listerine. So talk about the insanity. I just can't. Of course I drink it because I knew there was alcohol in there, and I'd been sober like 5 years, and I thought, I wonder if I'll melt or something if I drink this. And so I poured a shot of Listerine and drank it. And, to my surprise, or not to my surprise, really, it did exactly what I thought it would. It made me feel good and warm. And so I think it's just something that I'm bodily and mentally different from everybody. I can't drink. I'm an alcoholic always.
So no matter what, alcoholics who say, well, I can still have a drink every once in a while, most of them are fooling themselves, or is it possible sometimes?
Another one of the principles they like to teach in the Alcoholics Anonymous is that you shouldn't make decisions for anybody else. So yeah. I can't say anything for anybody except that if you want to test yourself, try some controlled drinking. Try like going to the bar and having 3 drinks or something consistently, and then just see how you feel about that. I know for me that would be just irritating, so I might be shaken after the 3rd one and then go home with the shakes or something. So it's not something that could work for me. So
okay, so this is not a question that I mentioned in advance that I might ask you. Okay, 2 of them. One of them is your sister. Same basic genetic makeup. Did she have any struggles along this line? She didn't behave.
She partied a lot, and caught some consequences for it. But at some point it became enough for her to stop or moderate or whatever. So she seems to have the predisposition to overuse substances, but I don't know that she's like I am. So.
Second question is, you've been coming here and playing in the band maybe 5 years or something like that, and so your last drink, was a couple of years ago, and so you have had, in the time that you were coming here and playing in the band, and I'm not saying this to embarrass you because all of us have stuff that we do, even though we're still Christians, that we shouldn't do. We know we shouldn't do, and we still do anyway. What kind of how did you feel about that when you were doing things that you didn't want to do, you knew you shouldn't do, and then you'd show up at church? Did you feel conflicted? Did you just feel shame? Did you feel like you just hoped nobody knew? How did you feel about that?
Yeah, it just felt like a charade, like a front, just duplicitous. I've got the public me who's, I'm a church guitar player and a teacher and respected member of my community, but I go home and drink myself to sleep every night. So, and that wasn't my only addiction. I had struggled with other things I'd rather not talk about. But I remember I thought, that Russ Martin knows what he's doing. He's like sitting there reading out of his little book and saying negative things that I'm doing just to get in my head. That's what he does, guys. He's trying to convert us like that.
Cha-ching! There's the idea, all righty.
Pointing out your sins.
Well, we have secret people that come and tell me about what's going on in everybody's life. People, and that talk was just for me. It's like, about 4 people just told me that. But well, how do you feel like? Because you and I have had conversations about God. We've met. We've talked about God and the Bible and the evidences for the Bible, and how can you believe these things, and how much faith does it take to be a Christian? And I know when I talked with Lee, and he's gotten up and spoken before, that I said, you just have to have 51%, and you're on the side of faith. That's enough to receive salvation, 51%. Because no one ever gets to 100%. And so, if you have 51%, you can become a Christian, and then maybe you learn some more, you grow up in the Bible, and you begin to see God work, and you go, man, I think it's like 65% now. Then it's 70%, and your faith grows, And so we've talked about that, and how do you feel, though, like God has now played a role, if you feel like it has, in this church in helping you to try to, keep your life the way it should be?
Oh, I still struggle with this pretty bad because, like I said, I have a bias against not believing in God, but it's opened my mind. The door has been opened, and I've, rather than just having denial for God's existence, I've thought, well, who am I to deny this? Like, maybe I should do some research myself. And so Russ recommended a book for me called The Case for Christ, and that appeals to my kind of logical sense. The guy, it's an excellent book, but he basically wrote a book about why the historical evidence for the validity and truth of the Bible. So as I've read that, that's opened up my heart and mind a little bit. I'm like, maybe. So for me, that represents serious growth. Yeah. And then the other thing is, my sponsor in AA, you have sponsors. You have somebody who kind of looks out for you or that you keep in contact with and make sure you're not doing the denial lie thing, playing games with yourself. And my sponsor always tells me that you're exactly where God wants you to be. And, you know, most of the time I'm just like, are you kidding me? That's so corny. Shut up. But I try to live my life as if.
That's what you say after I finish my talks also, I think, occasionally.
I don't know what it is, but I just have this propensity for denying everything around me. I'm like, that's ridiculous. It doesn't apply to me, blah, blah, blah. So, but I try to not listen to that voice. And if you looked back, if any other rational person outside of my own mind looked at myself and all the stupid things I've done and situations I've put myself in, I got to believe that, you know, God could be looking out for me. So, I mean, I've totaled 3 or 4 cars. That most recent DUI that really kind of turned my life around, my truck was on and it was in drive, and I was passed out on the steering wheel at a 4-way intersection in North Edmond, like 2 in the morning. So I could have easily passed out and foot could have fallen off the gas. The most recent time I got sober, it's because I totaled my car on the way home from Oklahoma City out by Lake Draper somewhere. First thing I remember is trees hitting my car, and then I hit a big tree and stopped. And even that, talking about the denial, wasn't enough to like shake me out of the alcoholic haze or whatever, because I put my car in reverse, and sure enough, it still worked. So I thought, hey, I'm still in the game.
Drive home.
Yeah, but anyway, I guess my point being, God's got to be looking out for me. There's got to be some purpose for me being here if I'm still around. So I try to just walk by faith, and then hopefully my heart and mind will follow. So,
what would you say to someone here who is sitting here and they, maybe other people or maybe just family members know that they're a closet alcoholic, or they have some addiction, serious addiction that they struggle with that maybe hardly anybody knows about except maybe, again, close family members? What would you say to them from your experience now? What would you say to them to get them, I don't know, how should they think of it? How should they deal with it? What steps should they take?
You really, man, it's the belligerent denial thing, like stay away from me, I'm not hurting anybody. That whole mindset that an alcoholic or an addict gets into, it's hard to penetrate that. So almost the best you can do is pray or hope that something bad happens to them that doesn't kill them. Because I know that for me, that's the only thing that penetrated that wall, was when something significantly bad happened to kind of, and as far as that goes, you know, don't cover for them, right? Let them lose their job, you know. If they're stealing from you, don't invite them into your house, lock them out, change the locks. I mean, the only thing that really communicated to me was consequences. So if you know somebody that's in that situation, just let them suffer. You kind of have to, that's the only way to do it that I know.
It's got to be hard for family members and spouses and so forth to sit back and allow the consequences to happen, you know.
I can only imagine. So
yeah.
I've always been on the giving end of you know, negativity or whatever. I try to imagine what my parents felt like. I basically turned my back on them at, you know, 16 or whatever, and only during periods of sobriety have I tried at all to rebuild that relationship. So I'm sure it's hard. I don't know.
Well, I think different people have different things that will be rock bottom for them. Some people, when their spouse moves out, they go, that's it. You know, I have a giant problem. Or they lose their job, or they have to file bankruptcy, or they get locked up. For some people, it's not until they are in prison in solitary confinement where they finally go, I guess this is the bottom. You know, some people have a bottom here, and other people, their bottom is way, way down there, maybe depending on the level of addiction or problem or whatever. But today, you know, one of the reasons I wanted Brian to come up is to talk about, you know, to the edge of addiction and back, you know, and back. And there is hope that you can make it. It's not easy, particularly for people who are genetically or environmentally have a predisposition to it. It's a battle that most of us can't even relate to. We just can't comprehend the level of hold it has on people, because we can't. Why would they keep doing that? You know what I mean? Why would they get themselves in that? Well, it's something that's beyond, you know, I think, the ability for most of us to believe who haven't wrestled with something of that.
Because it works, right? Like people, you have a choice between a negative outcome that's predictable, and you know exactly what's going to happen and how you're going to feel, or you have this big risk uncertainty. And to a lot of people, including myself, that uncertainty is just too scary.
That looks worse than this negative outcome that's you're sure
Hey,
will happen.
if I drink 20 beers tonight, I'm going to pass out, and then I'll be okay for at least a little while until I wake up again. So I don't know. It sounds crazy, but that's the mindset. So.
Well, one thing that I've always liked about Brian is he's very transparent, and he doesn't mind saying, no, I really don't believe that, or I have a hard time believing that. Sometimes around churches, we think we have to express belief, and it's always wrong to express doubt. But it's not. It's more important to God to be honest than it is to put up a facade of faith when there really is doubt in there that we need to kind of think about and deal with. I'm really thankful that Brian is on a good track, and hopefully the church family, we can play some role in helping to encourage you to go in that direction. And I have one more picture of Brian that I wanted to put up of him and Radonna. I think we have that, and Avery and Noah, and they're going to get married here in December. And so let's have a big hand for Brian coming out. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for doing it.